and I'm with Mothers Against Tennessee River Radiation, which is a project of the Bellefonte Efficiency and Sustainability team, and we're a local chapter of the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. We're volunteer environmentalists who are just concerned about issues regarding the nuclear power plants in the Tennessee Valley. And we did a monitoring program of radiation surrounding and downwind of Browns Ferry, and we found radiation levels from 2 to 40 times the background radiation downwind of Browns Ferry, and are concerned about the aging of the plant and the corresponding rise in especially infant mortality rates since the early 90s. There's been a steady rise from below the national average to 21.7% above, which is even higher for Hispanics. It's 40.3, and for whites, it's 32.6% higher than the national communities have in mortality rates for infants. So we're concerned that radiation may be a factor in this, and since we're getting high radiation readings in the valley downwind. And so I'm concerned, and we're all concerned, that aging may be a factor here. And so I have two questions and issues that I'd like to address regarding that. One of them is about the frequency and the extensiveness of monitoring by TVA, if that can be further developed to reflect what we're finding and to be more closer to real time rather than an annual report on radiation levels in the valley that's a quarterly report, but it's only actually published annually. If we could get more frequent and more extensive monitoring, we'd be really happy to see that happen. And I have a question about the charcoal filters that are used for the dry venting. I don't know how often those are changed, and I'm just curious about that. Is there information available somewhere to kind of give me some ideas on that?
Browns Ferry is currently complying with the effluent reporting requirements of the NRC, and that's what the current requirement is. Any member of the public, or if you believe that more frequent reporting is warranted, you can petition, you can request same with NRC, and there's an approach to that which you may be familiar with, but I can certainly provide it to you. As for charcoal dry filters, I'm not exactly familiar with what you're referring to, but perhaps we can talk about.
Yeah, you're not. It's not very specific.
Well, it's my understanding that the dry wells, before anything goes up the stack, there is a charcoal filtering system. It doesn't filter all radionuclides. Some radionuclides are not filterable.
The charcoal filters are tested based on performance, and they have to meet certain criteria each time they're tested, and they're tested on a specific frequency. The replacement of those are based on the performance of the charcoal, okay? Meeting the acceptance criteria for the test. That assures that those charcoals will function properly when called upon. And beyond that, no one seems to be able to remember whether beyond the performance testing, there's a set date that they're replaced regardless of the performance test. And I'm seeing some shaking heads, and that's probably why we couldn't think of it, because there isn't one. It's just based on performance monitoring testing.
Which is done regularly?
Yes, routine, required by the NRC, by their license.
And you test that by a release, and then you test it in a
Take a
different
sample.
way. He said, I think you're gonna tell me how you test it.
I'm not sure about for Browns Ferry, but normally take
Yeah.
a sample and they ship it off
Oh,
to
I
be
see.
validated for what percentage of the charcoal is still available for
I
use.
see,
for
I
flavor.
see, okay.
Does that answer your question?
That answered my question. Thank you.
So I'll try once again for those who've joined us by phone. Is there anyone on the phone who has a question?
Hey Vic, this is Sam Hansel, Beach Bottom, NRC.
Hey, Sam.
The last question about charcoal filters. Most plants have a continuous run time of 720 hours total. And when you reach 720 hours total, then they would also replace the charcoal medium. It may not be true at Brownsburg or other boiling water reactors at the 724-hour limit.
Sam, thank you. For the benefit of the folks here in the audience, Sam Hansel is a member of the 95003 team. He's a senior resident inspector at the Peach Bottom plant. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Now, to anyone else on the phone who has a question?
Schedule for the design life maintenance of the components at the plant. We had, it's my understanding, I read that we had parts for that were, their design basis was 8 to 10 years. In other words, they were designed to be in use for 8 to 10 years, you know, without failure. And they were like 30 years old when they failed. I'm like, can we do better than that? Isn't there some kind of schedule? And if there is, I hope that's in your action plan. And I'd like to see that it's a definitive action plan that has actual schedules, and it's scheduled that when a part or a component is due for replacement, that it's replaced before it fails. In fact, before its design life basis, you know, is reached. To me, that seems reasonable. We do that in our homes. So I'd like to see that happen with nuclear power plants.
You take the mic, please.
Gretel, I'm the senior resident.
Take the mic for the people on the phone. Thanks.
Can you hear me? The resident inspectors are at the plant every day. We're always looking for adequate performance. And equipment reliability is not just a 9503 issue, it's an issue every day with every NRC inspector. Time to time, we will come across equipment that'll fail for whatever reason. We always ask the question, why did it fail? There may be occasions when, you know, usually the licensee does research and says, well, it may have failed for reasons A, B, or C, hard to put a finger on. And sometimes it's end of life or vendor recommended life. There's no guarantee a piece of equipment will last to the end of life. There's no guarantee it'll fail at the magic date. What's important is that the licensee, if they do have failures of that nature, that they assess, extent of condition and what to do about it. And that's really where the residents come into play. We have process where we can, write violations perhaps, or we can look at the corrective actions, their extent of condition. We do go after those issues, is what I'm trying to tell you.
I think you're referring, when I heard you talking, were you referring to something specific that you were aware of and previously discussed?
Yes, I had read about,
It involves the same thing that
The
Mr.
component
Morgan
that
talked
caused the
about.
fire was
Right.
four times.
Right,
It's,
I just wanted to
that
confirm
was in
that.
the
Right.
2012 fire, is that
Right.
right? Yeah.
What you were specifically
It failed
referring to is there's the electrolytic capacitors are called, in cards, enunciator cards. That's what caused the little fire that Mr. Morgan was talking about. And yes, those capacitors that were long past their service life, that's what you're referring to.
Yes, service.
So yes, there's been some history, let's say, those being an example at the station where certain components were kept in service beyond their expected life and caused a problem. True, the resident inspectors actually reviewed the licensee's program specifically as it related to those capacitors and discussed other components in the plant that were issues or concerns with service life. And as a result of that inspection effort, the licensee developed a specific program to identify and address components in the plant that were beyond to identify and then replace components that were beyond their service life. Resident inspectors are aware of those. And also, as part of the 95003 inspection, when I talk about equipment reliability and the comprehensive processes and programs that they have recently put in place over the last couple of years and began to implement those, this type of area that you're talking about is part of those programs.
I'm delighted to hear that. Is this then a definitive action plan, a schedule that would be put into place for all components?
Yes, there
All
was.
parts and
Right,
components
the
have
the
a
licensee developed it.
service life,
Right.
and they will be replaced before the end of that service life. There's a plan in place to do that?
Right.
It's computerized now or something?
Well,
Is there-
I assume it's computerized.
Yeah, I'm assuming anything.
The-
We have an analog system.
I will tell you that I'm trying to simplify because, you know, these programs are quite complex for a 3-unit site, the magnitude of components, et cetera, so I try to simplify it, but the processes, programs that we reviewed and looked at as part of this inspection is intended to address programs, exactly what we looked at in 2012, and the licensee developed it as a result of the inspection efforts and the questioning that we had. What I'm trying to point to is that when you look at equipment reliability and the processes that they've put in place recently over the last couple of years here and began to implement, that's a long-term strategy that previously did not exist at Browns Ferry and should lead to improved performance.
Should lead to, so there's not really an action plan in
Well,
place?
yes, there is. There is an action plan, there is processes in place to track and monitor and ensure that these kinds of components and equipment are maintained. Didn't previously exist.
That's excellent. So it's not just the failed capacitors, we're talking about all the components. This is
Right, it's
this is going to be
way
a
more
program to
comprehensive than that.
replace before the end of service life. all of
That is what the action plan said. Now, you know, I'm always reserved on being very definitive because in the end, the licensee is responsible to, you know, follow the plans and to do what's required. So it's their responsibility to follow through on it. We will, as appropriate, as part of our oversight process and our inspection effort, we will monitor it and sample to verify and validate things. But, you know, that's how
But
it's
there
done.
are-
The responsibility is on the licensee.
Now, I'm so sorry, forgive my ignorance, but are you saying that there are actually no regulations in place that require replacement of parts before the end of their service life?
That's a good question. In some cases, no, there is not. And there's certain components in the plant, or there's some components in the plant that have very specific requirements. Some of them don't. It depends on what their function